So thank you for coming to the Redgate UX meetup. I'm Chris Spalton. Currently, I've moved into a new role actually, so this talk's very relevant to me because I'm 3 months into a new role. But we host this as part of the design team. So myself and Divya, who's there, she will have greeted you as you come. So we're two members of the design team. I'm currently the UX user research coach, and Divya is one of our product designers in one of our product teams, and we kind of look after this in terms of sort of a bit of community engagement and things like that. It's part of the Redgate has a sort of employee kind of community thing called Ingeniously Simple. So if you'd like to look up that anywhere, you'll see some of those kind of things. And we're available on Twitter to follow at UX Redgate there. The main kind of purpose that we do this is obviously as designers, the design community is really wide and open, and we take a lot from the community in terms of blogs and articles and talks and things like that and learn a lot. So this was kind of like a bit of an initiative for us to try and give somebody something back, if you want, to the community, and by hosting speakers and providing resources for people to learn about UX. And really they are for, whilst it is a UX meetup, it is about anybody that's interested in any sort of aspect of it. So user experience, product design, research, strategy, design thinking, UX challenges. So we try and vary up the talks as much as we can. But yeah, it's essentially for us to try and give something back to the community and provide a platform for people with interesting stuff to say to our audience. Really lucky today to have Imran. I think, as we said, Imran, I'll let you introduce yourself, but Imran's a UX manager at Otto. We've kind of known each other on Twitter for probably a couple of years now, I think. And we've been chatting a lot there, so that's how we know each other really. So it is actually the first time I've seen you in the flesh, even though it's through a screen. But I think what really, I think we get on really well, right, on Twitter, and I think it's like what initially stood out for me was, I think, like the depth at which you think and share stuff on Twitter is really good, and like kind of you're the sort of UX leader that we need more of, like really kind of. And you touched on it then, right? We need to find a balance, and you want your team to be happy and stuff like that. And I think that comes through in all your communications, right? So I think that's how we sort of. I can't remember exactly how we originally connected, but that's what really stands out for me. So it's like, I'm super stoked to meet you for the first time today, really, and it's really cool to have this sort of stuff. So yeah, he's going to be talking about imposter syndrome. If you dialed in early, you would have heard us talking about that, how it's something that's universal and we all suffer from it. Like I said, I've started a new role this year, and kind of I've got over that crest of, oh, this is an exciting opportunity, to now, like, do I actually know what I'm doing, and am I qualified to do this, which I'm sure I am, but it's very relevant for me right now. And yeah, I think the talk will take about 30 or 40 minutes, and we'll take questions at the end, if that's cool. So we'll let Imran present, and then if you've got any questions that crops up, yeah, write them down, and then we'll ask them at the end. We'll finish about 7ish. So we'll have plenty of 15, 20 minutes at the end to talk, ask any questions. And yeah, I think no one's here to hear me talk, Imran, they're here to hear you talk. So I might as well hand it over to you now. I'll stop sharing, and then you can take it from there, if that's cool.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Chris. By far the best introduction I've ever been given by anyone for a talk. So I really appreciate the kind words and all of the nice things that you've said about me there. So yes, as Chris said, I'm Imran. I'm a UX manager at Freeman's Grattan Holdings, and I work with a team of designers. I work with researchers. My background is in HCI. I've worked in design in lots of different design roles for quite a while now, and it's because of that that I've been able to get to the point of being in this position where I can talk about these sort of things. So I'll just start screen sharing, and then we'll dive into the content that I've prepared. So as Chris said, yes, I work as a UX manager. And when I joined Freeman's Grattan Holdings, there wasn't a UX team at the company. The company's traditionally a fashion retailer with a series of brands that sell online. And as they were transitioning more to online, I went into the company and I took on a design role. And I gradually start to establish UX at the organization. So I built up the UX team at Freeman's Grattan Holdings. As I said, my background was in HCI, so I did a lot of design when I studied at university. I did a lot of different design roles, and I just feel like I've had lots of different experiences, both good, bad, ones that I've learned from, and it just means when I do a talk like this, I can sort of lean on those sort of experiences. So I really hope everyone's well and they've had a chance to have a bit of a breather if you've been working through the day like I have, and to have a bit of a break before we dive into this session, because obviously it's for about an hour and you do want to give yourself a bit of a mental break. Now, if I think back to the past year, I think about all of the talks that I've delivered virtually, and I don't think I'll ever get used to delivering talks virtually. I'm far more used to delivering talks in a way where I'm in a room full of people and I can lean on the energy that people give off in a room and make eye contact with people and really try and get a feel for what people might be thinking and how they're reacting to things that I'm saying or things that I'm sharing. However, like everyone, you know, we're getting used to this way of working and we don't know how long it's going to be that this goes on for, but we just have to get on with it, don't we? When I think back to the last talk that I gave in person, it was pre-COVID-19, obviously, and it was at Huddersfield University. I'd been called back to Huddersfield University where I studied design and HCI, and I'd been asked to speak to a set of students that were in their final year of design and UX study. And this particular talk, although it was a talk I was looking forward to, it felt like a milestone in my journey as a person and also my career. And the reason for that is because of something that happened in 2005. So in 2005, I was in my second year of university, and towards the end of the year for a particular module, I had to do a presentation on the work that I'd done. Now, back then, I really hated the idea of doing presentations. I'd get this real sense of fear from standing in front of people and speaking, and I'd get really anxious and nervous. And even going as far as sharing ideas, I would really worry that people would be critical of my ideas. They'd doubt my expertise, my knowledge, my thinking, and just standing in front of people and presenting in that way was something that really, really filled me with dread. So I did this presentation, not looking forward to it. I did it anyway. And about halfway through, this room was full of lecturers and tutors and an external examiner. One of the lecturers called out my work and said, actually, Imran, I don't agree with what you're saying here. I don't agree with the conclusions that you've arrived at. I don't agree with your ideas. I think this is flawed. I think you've made a big mistake in the approach that you've taken. So obviously, that was my worst nightmare coming true when that happened. And I'm sure others have experienced this, but in that moment, I just wanted to get out of that room. I wanted to escape. I wanted to just somehow disappear. I just wanted that reality to not be a reality of what was happening to me. And I couldn't speak. I couldn't get my words out. I didn't feel like I had the confidence to respond and defend or anything like that. And I just stood there and froze, and I started to go red, and I felt myself sweating and all those sort of things that you can experience when something like this happens. The examiner, I remember very fondly, she spoke up in defense of some of my ideas, but ultimately the presentation was a disaster from my perspective, and I felt awful during it and after it. So a couple of weeks passed by. I got my results for the second year of university, and I did really well. I got good grades. To my surprise, for that particular module, I got a really high grade. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, it really came down to luck. I'd been lucky to get that grade. I was fortunate that somehow I managed to get away with a really bad presentation, possibly bad and not so great ideas as well. And I just felt like I'd got away with it almost. That was the feeling that I had, as opposed to feeling proud of what I'd done. I just felt like I'd managed to get away with it and managed to get a good grade. A few years passed by and I graduated from university. I got a good degree. I got my first job working for a company called streetshirts.co.uk. And I went in as the only designer in the company at the time, and they were setting up their own online platform. They were thinking of mobile. This was back in like 2008. It was quite a big thing, new thing even. And I went in as the only designer to go in and design the platform and the website and the apps and things like that. And obviously a lot of pressure on my shoulders to go in as the sole designer with a bunch of developers, really talented developers. And the year that I spent at Street Shirts was again riddled with lots of presentations, obviously the thing that I really enjoyed at the time. And I did a lot of these presentations and they all left me feeling really, really awful and really, really down about myself and the work because things were getting called out. The owner at the time was a rather opinionated individual who really, really called out my work. He'd walk over to the corner where I used to work with like bits of paper up on the wall, and he'd just come over and scribble all over and say, I don't like this, this is not good, and things like that. And that year just really made me question whether I deserved to be in the design space, whether it was right that I was in the design space. And it's one thing me explaining this now, but in that moment, I really, really started to question whether I'd picked the wrong career for myself. Maybe I needed to just move away from design and just accept I'd made this mistake with it. So anyway, I moved on from Street Shirts. We launched the site, and then I decided that was a good point for me to leave. I left, I joined another company. I started working as a UI designer. And a few months went by. I was still really doubting my ability around design and thinking whether I needed to just change direction in terms of career completely. And I came across this website, Drapers. They were nominating websites for awards and things like that. I was sort of semi-interested, sort of scrolling through like you do when you're just browsing around on lunch. And I came across a particular award nomination, something along the lines of Best Online Customer Experience. And the nominees were River Island, ASOS, and to my surprise and shock, Street Shirts. So my initial reaction was, wow, how on earth did this website that I clearly didn't do a good job of get nominated for an award? How's that possible? And my thinking was, maybe they redesigned the website. So I immediately jumped over, went and had a look at the website, and it was actually the same website that I designed. And that was really the turning point for me, because I really remember taking days, weeks to reflect on all of this and really think about things carefully. And I started to see this real disconnect between what I thought was my performance in these presentations, in these organizations, designing websites, things like that, and then actually seeing the accomplishments at the end, whether it's the degree that I got or the awards that on a website had been given or nominated for. And I really started to question this. I really started to think, hold on, am I getting this wrong? Am I actually good at this? Have I been looking at this the wrong way? Have I been sort of, sinking in this idea of me not being good enough because I don't like doing presentations and I struggle with them and so on? And I started to really explore this. I really, really started to explore this more. And I came across something called the attribution theory. And this is a concept from social psychology where basically what happens is we start to attribute our success to both external and internal factors. So, I do really well at something, I attribute it to something internal because I think I have a natural ability around like presenting or designing or researching, versus externalizing it by saying, I had a great team around me. I was fortunate that I was able to put the hours in and a lot of extra effort went into what I did. And this really started to fascinate me. It really started to connect back with what I was experiencing. And one of the reasons why we externalize a lot of our success and don't internalize it is because it's hard to explain natural ability. if I say to you that I have this natural ability to understand the end user and really craft something which allows a design team to run after these user needs and really create something valuable, and it's just a natural ability that I've got, it's harder to explain versus if I say I've got this great process that I found on Google and I've got 15 years of experience of implementing that process and I've got a great team around me. So our minds have evolved to understand simpler explanations, and the ones that often come from our internal ability are harder to explain. So again, this rabbit hole was interesting to me, and I kept going with this just because I was finding it interesting. It was at this point that I came across the concept of imposter syndrome. So just for completeness, imposter syndrome is that psychological state that we can get into, that I was getting into and I was clearly in, where I was having this real difficulty in accepting what I'd achieved. I was attributing and externalizing it to things that were not related purely to me. And I was doubting myself, even though I was clearly achieving things that I should have been proud of. When I was presenting, I was worried about being exposed. Will people doubt my ability, my knowledge, and so on? So this concept I came across in a paper that had been written by psychologists, researchers, Pauline Clance and Susan Eames, and they're doing all of this research around people and how people that try and work hard and achieve things, they experience this phenomenon. And this was that real turning point for me. This was the turning point for me where I said, this is what I'm experiencing. It's a real thing that I'm experiencing. I'm not imagining it. And if I'm experiencing it, I can overcome it. And this was the turning point in my career for me. So what can trigger imposter syndrome? Well, for me, it was a negative experience of presenting, and I try and trace that back, and it's possibly from a young age of being an introvert and not having the confidence to speak in groups or at school or whatever it was. But negative experiences kept building up inside me, and then presenting at university, compounded that, and then presenting at Street Shirts made it worse. So negative experience definitely can trigger imposter syndrome. Change can trigger imposter syndrome. Chris touched on a change in role. It doesn't matter how experienced you are. I had some reasonable experience under my belt when I moved into a dedicated UX role at Freeman's Grattan Holdings to set up a UX team, but that triggered imposter syndrome for me, because I was like, wow, I've been given this goal of setting up a UX team and I've never done it before, and how on earth am I going to do this and make it work and make the business believe that it's the right thing to be putting me in charge of this? Life pressures, when we see family members, siblings do well, we feel the need to, hit their sort of level of success. When we see friends succeed, when we see people that we look up to succeed, we really, really kind of try and create pressure on ourselves, and it can make us feel like we're almost failing and not succeeding in the same way. And one thing that I feel really strongly about, which is why I talk so openly about my personal experiences, is the lack of transparency. When we see someone and we think this person is a UX manager or a UX researcher, we don't know what they've been through to get to that level. We just assume that this person is brilliant and amazing and they're in this position because they deserve to be there and so on, but we don't understand what they've been through. I'm a UX manager, but when people meet me and work with me, they don't realize the journey that I've been on. And the lack of transparency can force people to start feeling like they're imposters. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, what if I'm feeling imposter syndrome? How can I identify it? What do I look for? Perhaps you can't nail it down to a negative experience, and you're trying to understand whether your own behavior suggests that you're experiencing imposter syndrome. So some of the identifiers that I found in myself was downplaying my expertise, not really actually understanding that I did have expertise in this field and really, really downplaying it. Focusing on the small mistakes. perhaps some of my earlier presentations were not too bad, but I focused heavily on the mistakes I was making, whether I was fumbling my words, whether I was getting mixed up on the slides, whatever it was. I just focused on the mistakes, and that really, really helped grow this feeling of being an imposter. And feedback is a big thing. You know, we can all worry about getting feedback on our work, whether we work in the finance department, whether we're designers, whether we work in, you know, in practical kind of like spaces and things like that. Feedback can make us feel worried because feedback can almost make us feel like, hold on, we just failed at something because somebody else found a problem with what we did or found a way to do it in a better way. And the obvious one, the one I was doing a lot of, is attributing, you know, success to external factors. If you're doing a lot of that, if you're not feeling proud of yourself, if you're not saying, you know what, I achieved this because of my ability, because of my skill, because of my knowledge, etc., you know, that is an obvious way to identify that you might be experiencing imposter syndrome. So can anyone experience imposter syndrome? Can it affect anyone? The reality is it can. It doesn't matter whether you're experienced, inexperienced, whether you've just come into a new role or whether you've been working for 10, 15 years. And research shows that 7 out of 10 people will experience it in their lives at some point. I just want to look at some examples of people that are quite renowned or famous, who we believe to be really successful in what they do, and they've actually experienced imposter syndrome. So if we start with Natalie Portman, a well-known actress, exceptional at her craft. She's done amazing things in film and theatre productions and so on. And she openly talks and writes about feeling like an imposter, especially when she became a Harvard student. She really felt like an imposter. She talks a lot about the fact that in her head she was thinking, oh God, people are going to think she's an actress. She doesn't deserve to be here. And she really doubted her ability and the fact that she deserved to be where she was because of how good she was at everything she was doing and how intellectual she was and everything like that. And she absolutely deserved to be there. But, you know, she was experiencing this despite all of her success. John Steinbeck, you know, he's a renowned author that's written so many kind of interesting and intricate books and written about all these characters that feel like they're real people at some point. Perhaps they lived, but he doubted himself. He doubted his own ability to write. He felt like he was fooling people, and he felt like his characters were, you know, far more confident in themselves and who they were than he was. And he felt like he was trying to create some of his characters that were almost better than who he was as a person. But it all came back to this idea of him doubting himself and really feeling like he didn't deserve to, you know, have the success that he clearly found. And something closer to home for the UX community, Doug Collins, someone that I follow on Twitter. I'm sure many of you will have heard of him. A great member of the UX community, always giving things back, always sharing things, running sessions, podcasts, video, kind of like live sessions on Twitter and so on. And he's got so much experience as well. And yet here he is commenting on the fact that he's experiencing imposter syndrome, despite his experience, despite the fact that all these people look up to him, he's experiencing this imposter syndrome. And there's obviously a pattern there that hopefully you're seeing, that often with success, you will start to feel like an imposter. As you push yourself to be more successful and you're pushed out onto the stage, so to speak, you're likely to experience this feeling of being an imposter more. So for me, it's about finding balance. You know, imposter syndrome sits to the side of confidence, and you know, the other side of confidence is that hubristic sort of personality where you overestimate yourself. And if we get into the research and psychology of it, you know, there's this whole Dunning and Kruger effect where people start to really overestimate their skills, their knowledge, and their ability to do things. You know, sometimes you might experience this when you interview someone where they claim they can do something, and they claim experience and knowledge and skill in something, and often, they don't realize that when put into a practical environment, they can't do that, or they perhaps overestimate themselves, and when they get the job and they try it and then they realize, oh god, I can't actually do this. So imposter syndrome sits to the side of confidence, almost the opposite of a hubristic sort of personality. And finding that balance is about being confident. It's about being confident in ourselves, in who we are, and that includes all of the learning that we're trying to do. Being confident does not mean you're perfect, does not mean you can't make mistakes, and does not mean that people, will not have feedback on your work. So how can you overcome imposter syndrome? What can you start to do to overcome imposter syndrome? And what have I done to try and overcome imposter syndrome? So what I'd like to do is just talk through a couple of key things that you can do if you're experiencing imposter syndrome, or if you're working with someone that you want to help and support, which I think is really important. It's not just about what we feel, it's about what others feel, so that we can create a better environment in the UX community and our UX teams around all of the people that we work with. So the first thing I would recommend is find a mentor. It's absolutely critical that you find someone that you have that rapport with, that you can talk to and openly share your fears and not think that they're going to judge you. It doesn't have to be somebody that is working in the UX space. It doesn't have to be someone at your place of work. It just needs to be someone that you can talk to and you can share what you're going through. Perhaps someone who's possibly got more experience than you and possibly a slightly different perspective on things. For me, having different mentors, and I still have great mentors where I work and out of work, I owe them so much, because being able to openly ask them things like, do you think I'm doing this well? Do you think I'm getting this wrong? What do you think I can do more of, less of? I honestly don't know where I would be without having the wonderful mentors that I've had in the past and I have to this day. So I would strongly urge you to find yourself a mentor. And especially if you're experiencing imposter syndrome, then it's critical that you have someone to speak to and share your thoughts and feelings with. One thing we often don't do is, we don't focus on learning. And if we just think of it from the point of view of learning to drive a car, the first time you learn to drive a car, you make a lot of mistakes. You stall the car, it barely moves because you don't really know what you're doing, and you can't quite get that balance and that sweet spot for the, for the clutch and things like that. But it's not often that people learn to drive a car and they come away from it thinking, I'm dreadful, I'm never going to learn to drive a car. After a couple of lessons, you focus on what you're learning. You think, right, I'm getting the clutch control now. I'm starting to understand it. I'm starting to get the whole concept with gears and things like that. And it's similar for whatever we do in our working lives. Focus on the learning. Don't just focus on the output and the mistakes. Focus on what you're learning. Even if you're learning something small, even if you're taking small steps forward and you're learning something new that was a bit of an unknown for you, that's really, really positive and really something you should be focused on and something you should be proud of. For me, one of the things I started doing after discovering Street Shirts had been nominated for an award was to say, you know what, I have to keep some form of journal of things that I've achieved so I can look back on them and actually feel proud of the journey that I'm on. And my journey is still not complete to this day, but I have a journal. I look on it occasionally. I like to remind myself of what I'm doing well and where I can go next. And I would strongly urge you to do the same. We often as humans focus on the negative, don't we? If 10 people give us a compliment and one person criticizes us, we focus on that one person that criticized us. That's just what we do naturally. So it's really important that we build these facets, these artifacts around us that can remind us of the great things that we're doing and the things that we can feel proud of. When we're possibly feeling down and low and worried about our place in work, in society, just to remind ourselves that, what, our history holds a lot of success, and that means the future will no doubt be the same. One thing that I've learned to do, and again is so important, is not to compare myself to others. Everyone is on their own journey. Everyone is very unique. And in a world that is so diverse, we often forget that. There's so many things that have happened in the world that have disconnected us from others. It's really important that we connect more with people and understand that everyone is on their own journey. We can't keep comparing ourselves to others on social media, or friends or people that have found success. We're going on our own journey, our own destination, with our own personality, which is unique and something that we have to be proud of. It's not going to be the same journey as other people. And that's what makes it interesting. It'd be boring if we all went on the same journey and we all had the same destination. So to overcome imposter syndrome, you have to stop comparing yourself to others. And lastly, something that I practice a lot of, and I gave a talk on this topic at NUX a few months back now, to actually take time to reflect, because our lives are so busy, especially when we think of the UX space. We're constantly designing, building, launching, iterating on design, doing discovery. When do we get that time to really stop and pause and reflect on what we're doing? We just go from one project to another, one launch to another. It's just so busy, and just life in general. I'm sure you'll all agree. Life in general is just busier, isn't it? There's just so much more going on. And that's even in a world of lockdown, even working remotely just feels like everything is really hectic and busy. So taking that time to reflect, to pause, and I always think of reflection as allowing leaves to just fall and settle from a tree, because when your thoughts settle, it just allows you to process them, understand them, really appreciate those moments of joy, of success, and really understand those unknowns that you can start to address and move forward with. So reflective practice is something that I do a lot of, even during my working day. If I've got 5 minutes between meetings, I try and pause and just step away and really think about what's going on around me, and try and process those feelings, those reactions that I'm having to different people in different situations. So can you really overcome imposter syndrome? I guess that's the question. The talk's title is Overcoming Imposter Syndrome. The answer is yes, you can overcome it, but it's really important that everyone understands overcoming imposter syndrome is not, it's not a single fight that you have and then it's done and dusted. It's a constant battle. For me, it is. For others, it is. Imposter syndrome rarely goes away, but like a boxing match, it will keep coming back to you round after round. And you just have to keep fighting against it. You have to keep doing those things that help you believe in yourself. You have to keep doing those things that can remind you of what you're achieving, so that you can drown out those feelings, those thoughts that are making you doubt yourself. And it applies to me in the same way. Just because I'm doing this talk here today does not mean that a few moments before this talk, I didn't have this little voice saying, oh God, I'm not sure I want to be here. I'm not sure I want to do this. And it's just about beating that voice down. It's just about saying, you know what? I'm still going to do this, even though that voice is there, because I believe I've achieved success before and I will in the future. And one of the reasons why imposter syndrome is so difficult to overcome, the reason it's a constant battle, is because we're all imposters. There isn't a service manual or a book that we can take and say, right, this is going to tell me how to be a proper adult or a worker or a designer or a researcher or anything else for that matter. Everything we do, whether it's the first time, whether it's the 10th time, whether it's the 100th time, we're constantly learning. We're constantly learning in our space, our world, and we might be learning in a different way from other people. But the reality is, because we're always learning, we're all imposters. And that's something we can all embrace and just say, actually, everyone is on the same level. We're not behind anyone, because we're all learning, because we're all naturally imposters in different environments. It means it's okay for us to feel this way. So what is my final message to everyone? This is my last slide, and I'm leaning on the amazing, the inspiring Brené Brown, which I'm sure many of you will have heard of. You will have read her books. I have, and she inspires me in so many ways that I can't even begin to describe. But my message to you is to be brave. Be brave with who you are, and to paraphrase what Brené Brown has said so many times in different forums, just show up. Me doing this talk today is me just showing up, because when I experienced imposter syndrome in the deepest way that I can imagine for myself, when I did the presentation at university, when I was at Street Shirts, I was ready to give up on everything. And then when the turning point came, I said to myself, even though I'm feeling this way, I'm just going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep turning up on that stage. I'm going to keep doing the thing that I think I can do and the thing that I want to do. And I'm going to keep trying, because through force of habit and practice, I will get there. I'm going to be brave. I know it's going to scare me. I know I'm going to worry. I know I'm going to get anxious. I know I'm not going to look forward to doing the presentation, but I'm still going to show up. I'm still going to go on that stage, and I'm going to do what I have to do. And through that act of showing up, through that act of being brave, that's how you drown out those feelings of being an imposter. And that's my message to everyone. It doesn't matter what role you do, what you do, whether it's you feeling this, as in your home life, in your work life. The most important thing you can do is just show up and be brave. And if you do that, then everyone that's listening to me today can absolutely overcome imposter syndrome. Thank you very much for listening. That's the end of the talk.
Awesome. Thanks, Imran. Sorry, it took me a little while to unpause there. That was brilliant, man. Like important messages there, I think. Like I totally, I think we've gone on similar journeys, right? Speaking and stuff like that, and putting ideas out, writing blogs and things like that. You kind of just have to, like you said, just keep plugging away, right? It's like I really agree with that as well. Cool. Well, I thought that was amazing. If we can have a round of applause on Zoom or on your screens or on the thing, that would be great. Thank you. What we got? We're a little way in, so rather than me talk, does anybody have any questions for Imran? Does anybody have any experiences they want to share, or anything like that? Be brave. Show up. If you're worried that your question will be silly, it won't be. That's the message of the whole thing.
Yeah, what you said just speaks exactly how my experience is as well, and it's really great to hear somebody else saying it. So thank you for that. I'm just a little bit wondering, when you say find a mentor, how do you look? Because most of my what I would call mentors are former employers or former bosses who you have a sort of professional relationship with, and it's very hard to own up and say, look, I've got insecurities about this, that, and the other. You always got this bravado about, around you. So, I mean, where do you look for mentors? How do you describe your ideal mentor?
That's a great question. It's one that I often get asked whenever I talk about imposter syndrome. So what I do and what I've done and found success with is looking for people that I've already become quite close to. And for me, it's often been in the work environment, whether it's people that I work with in different areas. So in one case, it was a developer. So not someone working in the UX space, but someone working as a developer. On another occasion, it was someone that I worked for. And for me, it always started with feeling like there was a lot of trust between me and the other person. I never actively said, right, I need an imposter, I need a mentor, and I'm going to go and look for this mentor. I just got the feeling that this is a person that I can rely on, and this is a person that I can openly share things with, and they will give me an interesting perspective and take from their side. And I guess I've been fortunate in having people around me like that, where it was easy for me to build those sort of relationships and find people that have been really, really good mentors with me. But I would suggest starting in that place where, you know, you want to overcome that fear of thinking, you know, do I really want to share my insecurities with this person? Well, we often share insecurities with people that we have a lot of trust with, and trust is in family members, it's in friends, it's in people that have often shared things with us and then force created that trust. So yeah, I would recommend starting there.
I think also, like, if you people are quite open to help, right? It's like I've found mentors, or I have mentored people when they've just like asked. it sounds like, I mean, they've taken a brave step there, right? But I think as long as you're conscious that people are busy and sort of kind of you know, like if they say, oh, I can't help you right now, but get back in touch with a month, and respect that kind of thing. I think generally, especially in the I don't know what industry you're in, but especially in UX and things, it's a very open industry, right? We share a lot.
It is, yeah. Yeah. And when I went back to do the talk at university since then, I've picked up a couple of people that said to me, look, do you mind being my mentor? And, you know, I want to ask you questions. I want to know what kind of role I want to go into when I graduate and things like that. So, you know, social media, I won't get into all the negative aspects, but there's some good aspects to it, and connecting with people, and sometimes just taking that punt and saying, I'm going to message this person because I've seen what they write about, or I look up to them, and saying, you know what, I'll just ask and see what that person comes back with, is also a, you know, a great place to start.
Hope that helps.
It does, yeah, it is helpful. I mean, I sort of work in software project management, moving over to UX, so I'm in a sort of unique situation anyway. But people outside work don't have a clue what I'm talking about.
Welcome to UX.
Welcome to UX.
and people inside work, obviously, there's, you know, you're always trying to get a job out of them as well. So it's well, I'll think about that. But thanks for your thoughts on that.
Try and connect to people on, try and find people that are talking about their work and their experiences on Twitter, like myself, and just see, you know, I've had people that I don't know just completely randomly message me on Twitter and say, you know, I've seen you posting these things, I'm trying to break into UX. Can I get some advice off you? And then it's just helped build up this relationship with that person. And I think for me, it's just about, for people that get to that place where they can offer that guidance, and I hope others feel this way, I know Chris feels this way, it's about giving back to the community. It's helping others, because our community is stronger. People are more welcomed into it if we give back into it. So I'm sure people, you know, will be interested in doing that.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Cool. Anyone else with any questions for Imran?
Yes, I would also like to ask a question about the third advice, I guess. So you recommended us to use an accomplishment journal, right? So what are we kind of supposed to write in it? Should we rather focus on the things that you can't challenge, so not opinions of people and stuff like that?
I think it's, for me, it's about writing down the things where I feel I've achieved something. So if I've delivered a talk, for example, and I get great feedback and people are posting about it on Twitter or something like that, then that is an accomplishment. And I will write that down to say, you know, I gave a talk and it was a really big success. People liked it. People enjoyed the session. That is an accomplishment. Obviously, when I was earlier in my career, and, you know, when I was studying, it's about writing down those, you know, if you do a qualification, for example, you know, you can write that down as an accomplishment. Perhaps you get a reward through work. You get the opportunity to take on a project because you've been working really, really well on other projects, and your manager, your leader comes to you and says, look, I want you to lead this because you've really, really done well recently. All of these little things are accomplishments. And to me, there isn't this sort of set criteria for what accomplishment is. It's anything that you feel you can say you've achieved something with, you know, and, you know, it might be something really tangible like qualification, or it might be something small like being given the opportunity to PM a project or lead, you know, a bunch of designers, researchers on a given task. So I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, thanks.
Cool.
Imran, do you combine that? Because I keep meaning to keep a journal, which I always don't do because I scribble a lot and stuff like that, but I don't ever keep it like organised in a journal. And like you also mentioned, does that like kind of combine with your stop and reflect? I like your metaphor, the leaves falling down and like your thoughts settling. And is that the kind of time when you are actually like, yeah, like how is it like a monthly thing that you think, all right, I'm going to think back across the month, or do you do it on the fly when a thing happens, or that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I don't have a rigid sort of time frame. For me, it works quite well when it's done naturally. Like if I've had a really hectic week and I just think, oh God, I need to just process all of this, right? I'm gonna have some time to reflect. And to be honest with you, I don't think I could function if I didn't. I must do a little bit of it every day without planning it too much. And then I do it in a more formal way where I get my journal and then I get bits of paper. And what I do is sometimes you don't realize what you've achieved until you stop and reflect and think about what you're doing. And you think, oh, wow, I didn't realize it. That I actually picked up an issue there and solved a problem and saved the business, I don't know, losing money or whatever it might be. And in that moment, you don't see it. But then when you stand back and really see the bigger picture, you realize it. So it's through reflection that you can establish what those accomplishments are. But what I do in that process is the journal is purely about what I've achieved. And anything that comes out of it, any unknowns where I think, hold on, I wasn't aware that, I don't know, I was behaving in this way that, I don't know, offended someone or someone didn't feel great because of what I said. Therefore, I'll put down something else. That becomes almost like a personal project for me to go away and say, right, I need to work out what this unknown is so that I can improve what I'm doing in that area.
Nice. Okay. Yes, it's a bit of both, really, right? So improvements and achievements, right? And that way, and that comes back to what you said about balance as well, right? It's like don't get carried away. Don't become sort of
what we do a lot of. I mean, I've done a lot of. I'm sure others have as well, where you do retrospectives. Retrospectives I do with my team. We focus heavily on the accomplishments. We do focus on the things that we need to improve, but I think too often retrospectives are about all of the things that are going wrong, and that doesn't people don't go away from a project thinking, we've achieved something if that's what you focus on. Balance is absolutely critical.
Yeah, I like that. Nice. Cool. Anybody else? We've got a few more minutes left for questions.
I think Wesley had a question on the chat. Wesley, do you want to ask, or do you want me to read it out?
Oh yeah, I could ask it. Well, based on your initial story about like how you were giving that presentation and how someone in the public mentioned that well your outcome what you suggested was maybe not right. It seems to very focus on like people saying something and then sort of like breaking you down in that area, and so it's like it's very impactful how others approach you. And is there something that you can do internally to be less reliant on how others perceive you and what they say, so that it more comes from within and you find the strength there instead of having to wait for someone to bring you back up?
Really interesting question. That's the first thing that I'd say. And the main message I'd give in response to that question is we can't control others. I've worked with some amazing, wonderful people that have left me feeling really, really inspired. I've also worked with people that I wouldn't describe in that way. And we can't control others, can we? We can't change others' personality and so on. And people will always have an opinion. Sometimes that opinion will differ from our own. And the important thing is that we just understand that before we stand up and get up on that stage and talk about something and share an idea, share our thinking, whatever it might be, and just remind ourselves that whatever other people say is not within our control. We can't force people to really love our work and really love us and really love our presentation style and things. So that's absolutely a must. And what often happens, certainly with some of the designers I've worked with and people that I've mentored, is that they forget that, and you do start to become very kind of reliant on this idea of trying to change people's perspective. It's not about that, because people will always have a perspective. Some people will always look at your work in a negative way for whatever reason. So it's important that internally you get comfortable with the idea of when you create something, you've created something in that given moment. You've made decisions. You've acted based on knowledge in that given moment. You've presented something based on what you thought was the best approach in that moment. So yes, other people will have different opinions. They might have better ideas, different ideas. But just to keep those two things separate, it's important that you realize in that moment what you did was the best that you could do. And yes, you can take feedback from people. And the key thing with feedback is not to take it to heart straight away, but to just give yourself time to think about and reflect on it. And that can help create that distance between what people are saying, because you can't control what people are saying. You can control how you react to it. And how you react to it is to say that I'm quite detached from my work because I did what I could in that given moment. And anything that I'm getting from other people is not within my control. But what I will do is I will reflect on what people say, and I will genuinely allow those leaves to fall and then assess whether or not I need to change anything that I'm doing. And I think that's really, really, really kind of the best way I can think of answering that question.
Oh, that's wonderful. And then I had another question, if that's okay.
Of course.
How, like, if we notice someone else having imposter syndrome, how could we best approach those people? Can we do something for them maybe to help them get through this?
Yeah, that's a real challenge. I think people sometimes experiencing imposter syndrome either don't realize that they're experiencing it, or if they're experiencing it, they don't really want to talk about it because they feel like that just makes the whole thing worse, that it's obvious now that I'm feeling this way, and then is there any truth behind it, and so on. So it's really challenging. So if you talk to someone about this and you think someone's experiencing it, you've got to find those sort of means through which that person opens up about it themselves. You know, you don't want to go in there and start talking to them about it straight away. You want to try and get that rapport with them where perhaps they open up about it. Maybe you share an experience with them. Many of the designers I've managed in the past, I often just tell them, like I've told a story today, I'll tell them about something I experienced, and that just makes them feel that I'm not this perfect guy that is this perfect UX manager that's had this perfect journey. And that transparency, people just immediately connect with them. They go, oh, you know what? Yesterday I experienced this thing. And then you've got that opportunity to try and help them, guide them. I mean, I'm managing a team, and for anyone in my team, past, present, that if I thought they were experiencing imposter syndrome, that's the approach I would take. You know, I would not want to go to them and bluntly just say, I would want to just sound them out and see how they feel about it, whether they're aware of it, possibly share some of my experience and just allow them to open up themselves.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, that's a great book, because like coincidentally, it's the reason you're good and you've got success is because you've made all the mistakes that they're worried about making, right? It's like, and that's how you learn and become better, isn't it? That's I always find that a real interesting thing, especially with junior designers, how they're so sometimes get paralyzed because they're so fearful of making a mistake, but actually that will help them grow if
yeah.
Awesome. I think, is there any more questions anywhere? I think we've perhaps got time for one more quickly, if anybody else has got one.
There is one in the chat, Spalton, from Andrew.
Oh. Andrew is taking feedback. Oh, Andrew, sorry, would you like to ask it?
Sure. So I take feedback really badly, and I wonder, I suspect it's a symptom of imposter syndrome, but the feedback can, from some people particularly, seem super critical. Is that imposter syndrome? Yeah, I feel it probably is for me, but how do I, some of the things you've talked about apply to that as much as anything else. And it's sort of, it's very hard to take that feedback sometimes.
So let's just dive into really interesting what you've shared, Andrew. And also, you know, in sharing it, it's something that you should feel proud of. You know, to be able to openly talk about these things, we need to build a community and a society where being able to talk about our fears is the norm, and that's how we help each other. That's how we make a better world, a better community, a better team. So if we dive into what you've said, Andrew, the ultimate question you've got there, and the thing you're trying to overcome is the feedback aspect. The key thing with feedback, in my experience, is that we have to find a way to detach ourselves from the work. And that's one thing that I personally feel proud of that I've been able to do. I've gone from being so attached to my work that any feedback would literally just kill me inside, and I would be feeling upset and down and doubting myself and everything like that, to a point now where any feedback, be it extremely critical, I just feel relaxed about it because I'm not attached to the work. I create the work in the same way that a filmmaker makes a film, and they do what they can in the time they have, and they create this thing for 2 or 3 hours and they put it out there. And a month later, they could have done it differently. A month later, they could have recut and re-edited that film. And I think of my work in the same way. And I'd encourage you to do the same. When you create something and you share it, and if someone's really, really critical and really, really giving you lots of feedback, just try and keep yourself detached from that work, and just remember what you created in that moment, you created based, you know, on all of the knowledge, all the experience, everything that you had in that given moment. Perhaps there's a new perspective, new bits of information that you can use to change that. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with your work getting feedback. But the key thing is that you don't fall in love with your work, because when you do that, then feedback becomes a real problem. Then you don't want feedback, you don't want criticism. And if you look at it from the point of view of, I've created this work in this given moment, but I want to know if I can improve it, if I can create something better. Like if I'm creating an app screen and I design it and create it, I've done the best that I can, but you know what? I'm not attached to my work. I want to know if I can improve it. I want to know if I can create a better app launch screen. So it's really important detaching yourself from the feedback, from the work rather, allowing that feedback to come in, and respecting that your work is about a journey. It's not, you know, it's not a conclusion that you've arrived at and that's it. That's the final conclusion. One final thing I'll say is, we were exploring feedback in my team a few months back, and we were looking at how we overcome kind of like the challenge with feedback and, you know, criticism and things. And one thing I drew parallel to is, often in the design space, this might not apply to you directly, Andrew, so apologies if it doesn't, but in the design space, designers start to treat their work like art. And the reality is, design and art are two very different things. There's a famous quote that I forget now who it's by, but the quote is something like, you know, designers dream of being artists, but designers are not artists. Art is about invoking your internal feelings and then allowing that to appear on a canvas. The design work that we do and the development and the build and the research is very different. So it's important that we don't start to fall in love with our own work. We respect what we've done and feel proud of it, but also respect that we might need to iterate on it and we might need to improve it, because different perspectives often can reveal things that we aren't aware of. So hopefully that helps answer your question in a couple of different ways, Andrew.
Very much. Thank you.
You're
awesome. Cool. So I said you were wise and thoughtful, didn't I, at the start? And I was right. So
hopefully I've lived up to that.
Cool. Thanks everybody for the questions. It's always great when we get engaged. In fact, obviously, thanks Imran for answering them in such, you know, really, really thoughtful ways, like I said. I think we'll leave it there in terms of questions. I do just have literally like 2 or 3 final slides, if that's okay, to quickly run through, but then we'll call it a night. So if we can have another final round of applause for Imran, please, for an amazing talk.
Thank you very much.
Love it. And yeah, just super quickly, these couple more slides to go through. Hopefully, well, if I can get it back up on screen again. Yeah, cool. So, zoom. So We do always do a call for speakers at the end of this. Like I said, we are trying to sort of help and support the community, and looking for people to discuss all aspects of UX and design, and various things of it. We have got a bit of a pipeline for the next couple of months, but we like to keep that full. So if you do have an idea, even if it isn't fully formed, feel free to reach out to us, and we can sort of help you with that over the next few months, if you know, to give you plenty of time to think about it and plan it and things like that. But we're very passionate on giving people a platform, especially if they're first timers or underrepresented communities. So feel free to, you know, don't let that hold you back or anything like that. We're very keen on that. So just get in touch either through the meetup thing, or you can hit us up on Twitter, as we said, etc., etc. We do have about 1 million different channels. There is a blog there. There is actually one there. Sorry, I can't remember the lady's name. Was it Joe? Break into UX. We do have on our Medium page there. We've got some tips and advice around that. And likewise, as I'm like, you know, in the spirit of it, if you do want a half-hour or hour-long chat one evening about it, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn or something. I'm happy to do that. We do also have Redgate Prod Development Twitter channel, which is the sort of general overall Redgate one, and Ingeniously Simple on a couple of things. We have recorded this, and it will be going up on our YouTube thing whenever we can get around to it and edit it. It usually takes a couple of weeks. And we've also got a podcast on Spotify, which also has tips to break into UX and other areas of design there. So if you just search for Ingeniously Simple, that's on there as well. So yeah, follow us again. Thanks for the attending. You know, it's the people and the questions that actually, and the speakers, obviously, Imran, that make the thing what it is. We're just here to facilitate that. So hopefully you've had a good time. There's those aspects there, and we hope to see you again for the next one. So I'm not sure we've nailed down a date for the next one, but it'll be mid-ish May, I think, something around then. So keep an eye out. We'll obviously share on those things. But other than that, thank you so much for coming along. Thank you, Imran, once more, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your evening. So yeah,
thanks very much.
Thank you very much, everyone, for listening patiently to the talk. I'll share the slides on my Twitter feed, and if you want to talk about or share anything with me based on what I went through, then feel free to get in touch with me. But thank you again for having me in, Chris.
Cool, no problem, man. Brilliant, and great to meet you for the first time properly. So yeah, nice one. Excellent. Have a great evening, everybody.